Hey, what's going on, No Nation? It's your guy, Kelvin Hunt, editor of ChopChat.com. Welcome to the Built for Playmakers YouTube channel, where we talk FSU all day, every day. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Hopefully you are having a great new year. Hopefully you're safe from the severe weather that's sweeping through the southeast. Here in North Carolina, we're getting a little bit of wind and some rain, and it's supposed to get worse in the next few hours here. So hopefully you've already gone through the worst of it and came through safely. But first of all, I want to thank you guys for all of your thoughts and prayers over the past week. I mentioned, had a death in the family, so appreciate you guys reaching out for that. And you probably hear my voice is still a little raspy, but I feel a whole lot better. I tried to record last night, and it just wasn't a good product, and but I felt better this morning, so I thought I would give it a go since it had been nearly a week since we last touched base via video. But in this particular video, we're going to talk about some of the puzzle pieces that Mike Norvell has acquired and kind of some early expectations for 2024. I'm seeing a lot of way too early 2024 rankings, and for whatever reason, I'm seeing FSU rated lower than they probably should be. I saw one poll that had Miami ahead of FSU, which is crazy considering that they don't even have a quarterback. But yeah, I mentioned I did a video on Christmas Eve, and I talked about having patience in the portal. I told you they were coming, that the coaching staff had done most of the work after the Christmas holiday, between their New Year's and with the spring semester starting early January. And that's what we've seen happen. Marvin Jones Jr. started it all, and then once they got DJ Uiagalelei in the fold, which I mentioned probably would get the ball rolling, once they got him in the fold, or either him or Cam Ward, whoever the quarterback was going to be, we've seen that kind of come to fruition. And FSU has added some really, really nice pieces via the transfer portal. And one thing you'll find that they're adding, aside from DJU, everybody else has multiple years of eligibility thus far, which helps with depth. It helps with if you happen to miss on a particular area in your high school recruiting. And so that's why I really don't stress too much as far as whether they hit on certain guys in certain positions in high school recruiting. And that's another whole episode I'm going to do here relatively soon regarding transfer portal recruiting opposed to, or compared to, high school recruiting, I should say. But yeah, I'm really, really excited about what FSU is putting together so far. I mean, it's almost like if you're playing Tetris and you just stacking those bad boys up together. And man, I see the vision of what they're trying to do. And also to paint the picture as far as why we shouldn't expect much of a drop off compared to this past season. What I want you to do is think back to the summer, fall of the 2022 season, right? So this is before they went 10-3. I guess now you got to say year before last, which is crazy to say. But if you remember, if you were a fan of the podcast back then, I wasn't even on YouTube then. I was still just doing straight audio. A lot of people had FSU. A lot of you talking heads had FSU at 7 wins, talking about if Mike Norvell was going to have a job and dead man walking and all that good stuff. I looked at the roster and I looked at the schedule. And a lot of this does depend on what the schedule is and, those teams, what they do. So I do pay quite a bit of attention to what those teams gain or lose. Looking at all the information, I felt like FSU would win at least 8 games, maybe 9 games. Obviously, they, far, surpassed those expectations and won 10 games in 2022. So think of it this way. The 2022 roster, that sounds good. Think of who we had, how unproven that roster was. I mean, it was talent, but it was a lot of unproven guys at a lot of different positions, right? So I think it's a testament to the coaching staff and their ability to get guys to buy into, the team aspect of things and to ultimately become productive players, right? So I'm sharing my screen here just so that I can kind of, not have to try to remember everybody off the top of my head. I'm just going to give you some context as far as the 2022 team, and then we're going to compare that to what FSU will have, what they have thus far in 2024. Obviously, they're not done in the portal, so it's an unfinished product, but I think we can kind of paint enough of a picture to give you an idea of, rough expectations compared to 2022, so that you'll see that there's not going to be, that much of a drop off from this previous year, as most rival fans are hoping and praying for, right? So going into the 2022 season, we had Jordan Travis, who, he finished the final 3 games of 2021 strong. I wrote an article in Chop Chat talking about if he were to continue that trend, how much that would impact the team, the offense, and, obviously, if you have great quarterback play, that helps hide a lot of weaknesses you may have. And so, but going into 2022, prior to Jordan Travis performing against LSU like he did, we really, we knew he had some potential. We just didn't know, if he could consistently tap into it, right? So, knowing Trey Benson, he was one of the most, oh my goodness, nobody wanted him. No fans wanted him whenever he committed because of, the prior injury history. You really didn't know what to expect from him at running back. We had Trayshawn Ward, who had about 500 yards of rushing yards the previous year in 2021. And then you had Lawrence Toafili, who was still relatively young, kind of a gadget player at running back. And then at tight end, you had Cameron McDonald, Preston Daniels, and Marquise Douglas hadn't even emerged yet into what he would have become at tight end. Then at offensive line, you had a young Darius Washington, you had a young Maurice Smith, Robert Scott, Dylan Gibbons, who returned, who was a big part of that. They got Dimitri Manuel in the spring, and Jasmine Turnington came in the summer. So a patchwork offensive line, pretty much. At wide receiver, you had a lot of unproven guys. Johnny Wilson had a high of 12 catches in the season coming from Arizona State. Micah Pittman had battled injuries at his previous stop in Oregon. And, he was more proven as a punt returner than anything else. We had Ontario Wilson, Pokey Wilson. He had done a little something the past couple of years. And we got Winston Wright, who obviously didn't play because he got in a car accident. And we got Deuce Spann, who was really raw at wide receiver. Then we had Kentron Potier, Darren Williamson, and some other guys. So not a whole lot of proven production at wide receiver. So when you think about that offense that season, though, Jordan Travis obviously, surpassed expectations. Trey Benson became a beast after like the first 5 games where he ran really timid. Trayshawn Ward, did what he does. Lawrence Toafili, kind of filled in nicely with his role. The offensive line, they were serviceable. And, Cameron McDonald and Marquise Douglas, they were serviceable. I'm forgetting about the other tight end that we had that he emerged. He was a transfer from somewhere, but he wasn't half bad either, especially as a blocker. But think about that. Think about all of that unproven production on offense. Then on defense, we had, going into the LSU game, think about it this way. We had Jared Verse, who came from FCS Albany, loads of potential, but we had no idea really if it would translate to the P5 level. Patrick Payton was a redshirt freshman at DN, and you had Derek McClendon at DN, who is the most proven defensive end on the team, and was really a jag, just another guy. And that's what we had at defensive end. At defensive tackle, we had Fabian Lovett, we had Robert Cooper, We had Jared Jackson. We had Malcolm Ray. And I'm forgetting a couple guys, I think. We had Leonard Warner, Dennis Briggs. And yeah, that's about it. Obviously, when Fabian Lovett went down with an injury, that severely impacted depth. Joshua Farmer wasn't Joshua Farmer. The Joshua Farmer we have now. Daniel Lyons obviously was a freshman. He was getting put into action way too early. So you didn't have a ton of depth at on the defensive line, and you had a lot of unproven guys at defensive end. Then at linebacker, you had Tatum Bethune, who was newly in the fold from UCF from the transfer portal. Kalen DeLoach had just come off his best season as a linebacker in 2021. Obviously, those guys, played much better at linebacker than FSU had in linebacker play in the previous few years. And then DJ Lundy also, he improved. Then you look at the secondary. Renardo Green had been injured his whole time at FSU, hadn't really done anything, moved from safety to cornerback. You had A.Z. Thomas, who had a strong spring, but he was still a freshman. You had Jarian Jones, who had been hurt his whole time at FSU. And then you had Akeem Dent, who had been hurt quite a bit. You had Shaheem Brown, who was, pretty much a redshirt freshman or freshman. He was inexperienced, put it that way. And then you had other guys like, who else do we have? Sidney Williams, who was hurt quite a bit. So you had some guys, but you didn't have, you didn't really have, a ton of just, big time players back there in the secondary. So think about it in a nutshell. You have a lot of improvement guys on the offense, a lot of improvement guys on the defense, and you managed to go 10-3, and the 3 games you lost were against ranked teams, one of which you never should have lost. You never should have lost NC State game. And those 3 losses were by a combined 18 points. Okay? Now, let's fast forward to 2024 and look at what we have coming in. We still have a few holes to fill, but let's look at, kind of just a 20,000-foot view of what we have. So obviously Jordan Travis is gone. We got DJU coming in. I think DJ can have a year comparable to what Jordan Travis had this past season, if not better. I think he's going to be more willing to run the ball, going to have more success on the ground, especially in short yardage situations. The offense should be more efficient in that regard. So quarterback, you should be good. Running back, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on running back because Mike Norvell he's found the ways to run the ball no matter who is at running back. So not going to spend a whole lot of time at running back, but you still have Lawrence Philly. You got Isaiah Holmes, who has been retained by the Ballers in. You got Cam Davis coming in, one of the top running backs in the country. You got Sam Singleton back there, who's a blue chip guy who showed some flashes in limited duty this past season. And you got Jalen Lucas, the transfer from Indiana, who's a kind of a gadget guy. If they can, get him in space against linebackers in coverage or on jet sweeps and things like that. Really fast guy that can do some damage. So you're set at running back. Tight end wise, you have Kyle Morlock, who is probably an upgrade over what you had in Cameron McDonald. You got Landon Thomas coming in as the top tight end in the country. He's a freshman, so I don't know how much you're going to get from him. But you still have Jarrell Powers, who is in his junior year now, I think it is, or redshirt sophomore year. You still have Jackson West on the team, who played quite a bit more towards the end of this past season. Maybe he puts it together as a blocker, so to speak. So comparing the tight end room now to what you had going into 2022, I still think you're in an overall better position talent-wise. Wide receiver-wise, man, okay. So you have, let's look at it here. the thing with a wide receiver is you're very young at that position, but you have the talent you have in this room is top tier, right? So let's look at it here. Obviously, you're going to have Kentron Portier returning. Darian Williamson's returning with he signed with the Battles and also Destin Hill going to be in his second year. Hakeem Williams going to be in his second year. And Drevius Jacobs going to be in his second year. All of those guys are former blue chip guys. I'm talking about the latter guys I'm talking about there. Now, when we obviously you got Ja'Kai Douglas also, who's a nightmare in the slot for opposing defenses, right? So when you look at what FSU's gotten from the portal at wide receiver, you got Jaylen Brown and Malik Benson. Jaylen Brown is one of the top wide receivers coming out this past season. Goldie Lawrence hit the transfer portal. So basically you traded a 3-star for a former, I think Jaylen Brown was number 68 overall in this recruiting class. Both have the same amount of years remaining as far as eligibility. So that's just like a swap out 3-star blue chip, right? Jaylen Brown runs a 10.6, or he ran a 10.6 100 meters coming out of high school. Malik Benson runs a 10.4 100 meters coming out of high school. And I don't expect much from Jaylen Brown. I mean, he'll probably have a role, but I don't think he'll be just a go-to guy. But Malik Benson played at Alabama this past season, had 13 catches, 162 yards, and a touchdown. But he had Jalen Milrose as his quarterback. So you kind of got to grade that a little bit differently. Alabama's just not going to just throw it all around the yard and, target their playmakers and all that good stuff with Milrose. You saw what he was in the semifinals. So I'm kind of going to grade Benson on the curve. But as far as potential, you got Benson, you got Hakeem Williams, Destin Hill, Ja'Kai Douglas. And when we're talking about players coming in and not having a ton of production, I mentioned Johnny Wilson having a season high of 12 catches before he came to FSU. Got FSU in his first season. He should have had 50-plus catches. But, I think he wound up with like 48 catches for 897 yards and 5 touchdowns. He should have had 50-plus catches and 1,000 yards receiving in 2022, but he had a lot of drops, right? So the staff has proven Micah Pittman, he had 30-some, catches, and I forgot how many. Let me see how many yards he had in 2022. Micah Pittman had 32 receptions, 330 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And the season before that, Micah had 12 receptions. So they doubled Micah Pittman's production. They tripled Johnny Wilson's production, right? So I expect in year 2 with Williams, Destin Hill, if these guys can stay healthy, you got Ja'Kai Douglas and, Benson, all these guys, and you got DJU has a cannon for an arm. They're going to look to stretch the field vertically, which should open up a lot of stuff underneath. It's going to open up the run game. You got a quarterback that can run. Think about it that way. So offensive line-wise, you got 4 of your starters from last year returning. Was it Darius Washington, Maury Smith, Robert Scott, Keandre Jones? Your young guys like Jalen Early and Julian Armella should be able to contribute. They'll probably look to get, 1 or 2 guys from the transfer portal, an interior guy and an exterior guy. So on offense, you shouldn't really – you may have a better offense in 2024 than you did in 2023 because FSU's offense last year, for whatever reason, Jordan wasn't running as much. Early in the year, for whatever reason, they were really really depended upon just a lot of 50-50 balls. It seems like the offense was just stagnant. It wasn't the same offense that we saw in 2022 when you had Micah Pittman kind of just opening things up underneath and things like that. So I think we'll see more of an efficient offense and probably an explosive offense. All right. So let's move over to defense. So we talked about what we had on defense. You had unproven guys at defensive end. You had little to no depth at defensive tackle. You had little to no experience or proven guys in the secondary. You had Kalen DeLoach at linebacker, and you had Tatum Bethune, who came over from UCF. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about linebacker first. Linebacker, you definitely got to get some help from the portal. Omar Graham Jr., he could take a step this coming year. He was a redshirt freshman this past year. Also heard he was hurt most of the year. So I don't know if you know, man, but if you're hurt, man, that really affects how well you play. I know when I was in college playing baseball, you had some nagging injuries. It affects you in a lot of ways you don't think about if you don't play the game. So we'll see what he does. Nicholson, a lot of people expected him to contribute this season. I didn't think that was going to be the case. It's really hard. Linebacker, similar to wide receiver, is a really tough transition for freshmen. And so just because a guy's highly rated does not mean he's going to just jump in and just become an 60 tackle guy automatically. It's not a video game, guys. And plus, Nicholson didn't play a ton of linebacker when he was in high school. So a lot of people before the season were saying, by the end of the year, he should be a contributor and all that. I mean, no. But he'll have this offseason to continue working and to get better. You got Justin Cryer, you got DeMarco Ward, and you got a couple of freshmen coming in. So you got bodies at the position. You're just really young, and you got to get some help from the portal. So aside from linebacker, defense is going to still be a problem, I think, and I mean that in a good way, right? So when you look at, we're talking about the defensive end position, and by the time you see this, it may be old, and we may have already announced a commitment or something. But FSU has Patrick Payton returning, Byron Turner returning. They got Marvin Jones Jr. from the transfer portal. So that's 3 guys with experience. That's more. Now you may not have the ceiling in that you had, but you got more proven guys, more experienced guys than you had in 2022 at defensive end. Plus, if you get, which it looks like FSU trending for the West Virginia defensive end, if you get him, and I think they're looking at Zion Young, the Michigan State defensive end, and then there's Oregon State defensive end. If they get 2 or 3 of those guys, it's going to be an upgrade overall compared to what you had in 2022. Defensive tackle, you're going to have Joshua Farmer, and again, this is all contingent upon guys staying and not entering the portal and all that stuff. Joshua Farmer, Darrell Jackson, Malcolm Ray left and went to Rutgers, but you basically replace him with Grady Kelly. Grady Kelly has 2 years of eligibility remaining, so that helps with your depth. You got Daniel Lyons. You got KJ Sampson. You saw that KJ Sampson just signed with the Battles and also. So you have depth there. Daniel Lyons played quite a bit this past season. Obviously, Joshua Farmer was one of the top guys when he was in there. Darrell Jackson should be one of the top guys. Obviously, he had to sit out this year until the Orange Bowl. As I mentioned in the other video, I don't want to penalize him for that performance. I mean, he hadn't played all year in a real game. So, but your top two guys and then your 2 rotational pieces in there should be one of the better units in the ACC, right? It's definitely more depth than what you had going into the 2022 season. All right, and then when we talk about when we talk about the secondary, you got AZ Thomas, and he's going into his junior year. He should be one of the top corners in the country, or in the ACC at least. You have Fincho Cypress, who's solid. You have Shaheem Brown at safety. You have Conrad Huzzy, who played a lot as a freshman. Had made some mistakes, but also flashed here and there. Just got to work on better angles and not running beside guys for 10 yards before he decides to make a tackle. But then you have a ton of young talent that could be a player for you. Okay, so you have from the 2023 class, you have Quindarius Jones, who just signed with the Battles in. You have KJ Kirkland, who could play safety, who got hurt. I think he got hurt in the Southern Miss game, so he was hurt most of the year. This past year, didn't get to play much. They're bringing in Devontae Brown. They brought in Devontae Brown from Miami. And a lot of people don't like that take. And he could be a PWO from what I've heard, but I don't know if that's true. But Patrick Surtain likes him, coached him in high school. I look at it this way. He can't be any worse than 3. And it's probably more of an indictment on Miami's coaching staff than the young man. The young man balled out of UCF, went to Miami, like a lot of other players have done, and they fall off like Big Mac toppings. I don't mind the take if that's who Surtain wants. So he at least brings you experience at the safety position because that's where he's going to play. Then you also have Earl Little Jr., who basically could play corner. He could play nickel. He could play safety. Sounds like he's going to play nickel, which would basically replace Jerry Jones. And then you have all of the young talent. Charles Lester, Kai Bates, Jamari Howard, all those guys coming in as freshmen to compete, along with all of the guys they brought in last year. So when you look at this team, overall, this team is more talented. The floor of this team is more talented at this point than they were going into 2022. I think overall you have more proven players. You have, depending on who else they have from the portal, you're going to have more experience at certain positions, aside from linebacker. And looking at the schedule, I know a lot of people think the schedule is going to be difficult or more difficult or whatever, and I don't. Again, it just depends on what other teams do. But the way Mike Norvell goes about constructing this roster, he clearly has a vision of what he wants to do, and I think people are going to be surprised at what FSU does. I'm seeing FSU at number 20, number 23 in the way too early 25 top 25 rankings, and listen. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if there's not that big of a drop off from this past season. I know rival fans are hoping and praying for that. You may have, depending on what they do at linebacker, you're probably going to have a little bit of a drop off on defense. But if the offense can pick it, because if it wasn't for the defense, we wouldn't have gone 13-0 this past season. No question about it. And I said this team would carry as far as the offense went, and ultimately, that's what the committee used to keep FSU out of the college football playoff. Ironically, we saw that in the playoffs, quarterback play didn't mean much at all. So eat on that, college fraud invitational. But if the offense can pick it up a little bit and keep make it so that the defense doesn't have to play at such a high level, every game. If they can go out there and not go, 2.5 quarters and of lulls without putting up points. Listen, I see no reason why FSU can't compete for the ACC title again and be one of the 12 teams to make the college football playoffs. But again, it's going to depend on who else we get from the portal. Like I said, we still need to hit, again, defensive end. By the time you see this again, something may have already dropped. But defensive end, interior, and tackle at offensive line, 2 linebackers at least, and what else? I mean, that's pretty much it. Yeah, linebacker, offensive lineman, defensive end. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else is kind of not necessarily a necessity. Now, if they could go out there and get another defensive tackle or something that was like a difference maker, then hey, you definitely take them. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the roster overall, I feel very confident about what this team will do in 2024. And it's cool too, because when you look at the temperature around the program in December, it felt like obviously you won the ACC, then 12 hours later you got snubbed, then you had early signing day, losing a couple high ranked recruits, which again I want to have an episode solely on transfer portal compared to high school recruiting. How these so-called recruiting experts don't understand how the game has changed is beyond me. But anyway, just kind of the overall feel with early signing day from the fan base, and then obviously the Orange Bowl guys opting out and just everybody piling on FSU. I feel like the way the playoffs played out with Alabama losing, Texas losing, and the quarterbacks, playing like trash in the playoffs, excuse me, I think that kind of, gave us a little bit of, we can put my chest out a little bit. Excuse me. And, now we've gotten some momentum on the trail from the transfer portal. I feel like we're ready to put all that negative stuff behind us and start building for 2024. But it looks like my voice held out just long enough for me to make it to the end of this. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this here. But I appreciate you guys' support. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. And we'll see who else we get in the portal in the next few days. And we'll be in touch with you guys probably before the end of the week to discuss that. Until then, go Noles.